The emergency session of the Galactic Council had been called in the middle of the night cycle. Ambassador Zector of the Vorthak Empire rushed through the gleaming corridors of the Council station, her forearms clutching data tablets while her breath came in short gasps. The message that had reached every civilized world in the galaxy was impossible to believe, yet the sensor readings didn't lie. Humanity had returned. The Great Assembly Hall buzzed with nervous energy as representatives from over 300 species took their seats. The air recyclers worked overtime to accommodate the different atmospheric requirements, creating swirling patterns of various gases that somehow reminded Zector of storm clouds. She had seen those same patterns 800,000 years ago during the last war. "Order, order!" Chancellor Mordun's voice boomed through the translation matrix, his crystalline form pulsing with agitated light. The Crystarch had been alive during the human exile, one of the few beings present who remembered those dark times. "We gather here today to address a situation that should have been impossible." The main holographic display activated, showing a vast fleet of ships unlike anything the current galaxy had seen. They were sleek, predatory things that seemed to bend light around their hulls. The ships bore no resemblance to the crude vessels humanity had possessed during their banishment, yet the energy signatures were unmistakably human. 48 hours ago," Chancellor Mordun continued, "our deep space monitoring stations detected this fleet emerging from the void between galaxies. Initial scans suggested they were refugees from some distant conflict. We prepared to offer standard humanitarian aid protocols." A new image appeared, the twisted wreckage of a Council patrol ship. Gasps and nervous clicking filled the chamber. The CSS Harmony approached the lead vessel with peaceful intentions. They transmitted standard greeting protocols and offered assistance. The humans' response was immediate. The hologram shifted to show weapon readings that made even the most warlike species in attendance step back. Energy levels that shouldn't have been possible, technology that defied current understanding of physics. No demands were made, no communication was attempted, they simply opened fire. Ambassador Yultara of the Hegemony Collective stood on her 6 legs, her insectoid features twitching with agitation. "This is impossible. The humans were barely capable of interplanetary travel when we banished them. They had no faster-than-light technology, no understanding of dimensional physics. How could they have developed such capabilities?" "That, honored delegates, is what we must determine," Chancellor Mordun replied. "But first, we must understand what we're truly facing." The display changed again, showing a recording from the Harmony's final moments. A human voice came through the speakers, speaking in their ancient language, but the translation matrix converted it instantly. "This is Commander Sarah Chen of the Terran Expeditionary Force. You have 30 seconds to surrender your vessel and prepare to be boarded. Any resistance will be met with immediate termination." The voice was calm, professional, but underneath lurked something that made every being in the chamber instinctively afraid. It was the tone of a predator that had cornered its prey. "The commander's bioreadings indicate she is chronologically over 700,000 years old," Chancellor Mordun added quietly. "Yet her cellular structure appears to be that of a human in their physical prime." Senator Clack of the Reptilian Dominion hissed through his translator. "Impossible. No biological form can survive that long without degradation. Even our most advanced life extension technologies only provide 50,000 years at most." "The humans appear to have solved the problem of biological mortality," came a new voice from the back of the chamber. All heads turned to see ancient keeper Thulvar, a being so old that most considered him a legend. His species had witnessed the rise and fall of a dozen galactic civilizations. "Keeper Thulvar," Chancellor Mordun said with obvious respect, "your presence honors us. Do you have insights into this situation?" The ancient being's voice creaked like old metal. "I was there when the vote was cast. I was one of the few who argued against banishment. I told the Council then that we were making a mistake, that driving humanity into the void would only make them stronger." "You spoke in favor of extinction," Ambassador Zector protested. "I've read the historical records. You advocated for the complete destruction of their species." "No," Thulvar replied with a shake of his massive head. "I advocated for integration. I warned that humanity's greatest strength was their ability to adapt, to overcome any challenge through sheer determination. The Council chose the worst possible option, giving them a challenge that would take hundreds of thousands of years to overcome. The chamber erupted in angry voices, but Thulvar continued speaking, his voice somehow cutting through the chaos. You sent them into the void with nothing but their ships and their anger. Do you know what humans do when they're angry and have nothing left to lose? They become something you don't want to face in the dark. A new alarm sounded through the chamber. Chancellor Mordun's crystalline form flashed red as he received an urgent message through his internal communication systems. Honored delegates, I've just received word from our outer defense perimeter. The human fleet has begun moving toward the galactic core. They've destroyed 17 monitoring stations and ignored all attempts at communication. How fast are they moving? Asked General Vexter of the United Militant Forces. They're crossing sectors in hours, General. At their current rate of travel, they'll reach the inner systems within days. The chamber fell silent. Even the most advanced council ships took weeks to cross the same distance. We must mobilize the combined fleet immediately, General Vexter declared, his scarred features grim with determination. Whatever technology the humans have developed, we outnumber them millions to one. No force in the galaxy can stand against the united strength of 300 civilizations. Can't we? Keeper Thulvar asked quietly. Tell me, General, what do your intelligence reports say about human numbers? General Vexter hesitated. The fleet consists of approximately 50,000 vessels of various classes. And how many humans are aboard those vessels? Another pause. We're not certain. Long-range scans are being blocked by some form of interference. I can tell you, Thulvar said, each ship carries between 10,000 and 1 million humans depending on its class, but that's not the number that should concern you. What do you mean? Chancellor Mordun asked. The humans didn't just survive their exile, honored Chancellor. They thrived. 800,000 years of evolution, of technological advancement, of preparing for this exact moment. The ships we're seeing, they're not their entire civilization, they're just the advance force. The implications hit the chamber like a physical blow. If 50,000 ships was just an advance force. How many humans are there? Ambassador Zector whispered. Thulvar's ancient eyes gleamed with something that might have been admiration. When we banished them, Earth's population was roughly 8 billion. They've had 800,000 years to expand, to grow, to build. My estimates suggest somewhere between 500 trillion and 1 quadrillion human souls now exist in the void between galaxies. The numbers were too large to comprehend. Even spread across thousands of worlds, the current galactic population barely reached 100 trillion beings. But surely, Senator Clack protested, surely they can't all be warriors, children, elderly, civilians. You still don't understand, Thulvar said sadly. You banished them when they were divided, weak, struggling with their own nature. Do you know what 800,000 years of survival in the void does to a species? It forges them into something harder than diamond, sharper than any blade ever made. A new message reached Chancellor Mordun. His crystalline form pulsed faster as he processed the information. The humans have just transmitted a message to all council worlds simultaneously. It's being broadcast on every frequency, through every communication network in the galaxy. What does it say? General Vexter demanded. Chancellor Mordun's voice became quiet, almost respectful. It's a single word repeated in every known language in the galaxy. Remember. The chamber erupted in chaos again, but Keeper Thulvar remained silent, his ancient mind processing implications that the younger species couldn't grasp. They're not here for conquest, he said finally, his words somehow reaching every being present despite the noise. They're here for justice. The chaos stopped instantly. Every eye in the chamber focused on the ancient keeper. Justice? Ambassador Zector asked. We banished an entire species for the crime of being too successful, too adaptable, too dangerous to our comfortable status quo. We sent them to die in the void because we were afraid of what they might become. Thulvar's voice grew heavy with regret. Now they've become exactly what we feared, and they've come home to collect what we owe them. General Vexter stood straighter, his military bearing asserting itself. Then we'll give them a fight they'll remember. The combined fleet has never been defeated. The combined fleet has never faced humanity at war, Thulvar replied. You're thinking of them as they were, a single species from a single world using primitive weapons and tactics. That's not what's coming for us. The holographic display shifted again, showing long-range scans of the approaching human fleet. The ships moved in perfect formation, their coordination suggesting a level of unity that no galactic civilization had ever achieved. "Look at them," Thulvar continued. "No communication delays between vessels, no confusion in their movements. They think as one while maintaining individual initiative. We created a species-wide military force unlike anything the universe has ever seen." "You speak as though their victory is assured," Chancellor Mordun observed. "Isn't it?" Thulvar asked simply. "We gave them 800,000 years to prepare for this moment. They've spent that entire time knowing they would return to face us. Every technological advancement, every strategic development, every child raised from birth has been focused on this single goal. Can any of us say the same?" The truth of his words settled over the chamber like a suffocating blanket. The Galactic Council had spent the last 800,000 years in peace, growing comfortable, soft. Their military forces were trained for minor conflicts and piracy suppression, not total war against an enemy that had spent 800 millennia preparing specifically to destroy them. "So what do you suggest?" Chancellor Mordun asked quietly. "Surrender." "I suggest we remember why we banished them in the first place," Thulvar replied, "and pray that time has mellowed their anger." But even as he spoke, new reports were flooding in. Human ships were appearing throughout the outer rim, moving with impossible speed and coordination. They struck without warning, obliterated their targets with weapons that seemed to violate the laws of physics, and vanished back into the void before any response could be mounted. They weren't seeking territory or resources. They were sending a message, and that message was becoming increasingly clear with each destroyed outpost, each silenced monitoring station, each burning wreck of a council vessel. Humanity had returned, and they remembered everything. Commander Sarah Chen stood on the bridge of the dreadnought Retribution, her hands clasped behind her back as she watched the tactical display showing the approach to the Cathara system. The blue-white star had once been humanity's first stop beyond Earth, back when they were still welcomed in galactic society. Now it would be their first major statement upon return. "Ma'am," called Lieutenant Morrison from the sensor station, his voice carrying the same controlled calm that all humans had developed over their long exile. "Deep scans confirm 47 inhabited worlds in this system, total population approximately 12 billion beings. Defense grid consists of standard council configuration, orbital platforms, patrol fleets, and planetary shields." Sarah nodded, her enhanced vision studying the data streams flowing across her neural interface. 800,000 years had given humanity time to perfect the marriage of biological evolution and technological enhancement. Her body appeared to be that of a 30-year-old human woman, but her mind contained the accumulated experience and memory of 700 millennia. "Any response to our approach?" she asked. "Standard warnings, ma'am. They're demanding identification and stating their intention to defend themselves if we don't comply." A slight smile played at the corners of Sarah's mouth. They had no idea what they were truly facing. The combined council fleet that had once seemed so intimidating was now laughably primitive to human eyes. "Captain Wei," she said, turning to her tactical officer, "begin the demonstration." Captain Wei's fingers danced across his console with inhuman speed, his enhanced nervous system allowing him to process and execute combat algorithms in microseconds. Around them, the bridge crew worked with the same supernatural efficiency, each human enhanced not just physically, but mentally. Their consciousness expanded to handle the complexities of technologies that would have been impossible for their ancestors to comprehend. "Targeting solutions locked," Wei reported. "Shall we disable their defenses or simply bypass them?" "Neither," Sarah replied. "We're going to show them what we learned in the void." The tactical display shifted, showing the deployment of the human fleet. 50,000 ships arranged themselves in patterns that seemed random to conventional military thinking, but followed principles of warfare that had evolved during humanity's long exile. Each vessel was a perfect fusion of technologies that the galactic civilizations couldn't even imagine: matter converters, dimensional weaponry, consciousness-guided targeting systems that could predict enemy movements before they were made. "Initiating Phase 1, Sarah announced, her words being transmitted instantly to every human ship in the fleet through quantum-entangled communication systems. The first indication the Cathara defenders had of what they faced came when their sensors simply stopped working. Not damaged, not jammed, simply turned off by human technology that could rewrite the fundamental properties of matter at the quantum level. Admiral Torvak of the Cathara Defense Fleet stared at his blank screens in growing panic. What's happening? Where are the enemy ships? His tactical officer, a young Zelonian with 4 arms that moved frantically over his controls, could only shake his head. Sir, our entire sensor grid has gone dark. It's like space itself has become opaque. That's impossible. Switch to backup systems. I have, sir. Tertiary systems, too. Everything reads normal on our end, but we're getting no readings from outside the immediate vicinity of our vessels. Admiral Torvak had 40 years of military experience, had fought pirates and raiders throughout the Outer Rim, but he'd never encountered anything like this. Launch probe drones. If our sensors won't work, we'll use direct visual observation. The probes launched, their chemical drives pushing them out from the fleet at maximum acceleration. For several minutes, they transmitted normal readings, empty space, distant stars, the familiar backdrop of the galaxy. Then, one by one, they simply vanished from contact. Sir, the communications officer called, her voice tight with fear. I'm receiving a transmission from the lead human vessel. Put it through. Commander Sarah Chen's image appeared on the main screen, her human features calm, and composed in a way that somehow made her more terrifying than any snarling alien warrior would have been. Admiral Torvak, she said, and the Admiral was shocked to hear his name spoken in perfect Kitharan dialect. I am Commander Chen of the Terran Expeditionary Force. Your fleet has been neutralized. That's impossible, Torvak replied automatically. We haven't been attacked. Our ships are fully operational. Sarah's smile was gentle, almost motherly. Admiral, please look out your viewport. Torvak turned to the main viewing port, and his blood turned to ice. His fleet, 150 of the most advanced warships in the galaxy, hung motionless in space. But they weren't alone. Surrounding each council vessel, sometimes only meters away, were human ships that had somehow appeared without triggering a single alarm. How was all he could manage to whisper? 800,000 years, Admiral. We've had 800,000 years to perfect our understanding of physics, of war, of survival. Your sensors can't detect us because we exist partially outside normal spacetime. Your weapons can't target us because we've learned to manipulate probability itself. And your shields can't stop us because we've discovered technologies that make matter itself optional. As if to demonstrate, one of the human ships simply phased through a council destroyer, passing through its hull like a ghost before rematerializing on the other side. But we're not here to destroy your fleet, Sarah continued. We're here to deliver a message. The tactical display on Torvak's bridge flickered and changed, showing not his own fleet positions but a view of the galactic core, where the Council's primary worlds maintained their governments and populations. Every major system in the galaxy is currently experiencing what you're experiencing, Sarah explained. Human forces have simultaneously appeared at every significant military installation, every populated world, every center of power in galactic civilization. We are not invading. We are announcing our presence. The implications hit Admiral Torvak like a physical blow. Simultaneous deployment across the entire galaxy meant the human fleet was thousands of times larger than anyone had estimated. It meant coordination capabilities that defied understanding. Most terrifyingly, it meant humanity had achieved a level of strategic thinking that encompassed not just individual battles or campaigns, but the entire galactic political structure. What do you want? He asked. What was stolen from us? Sarah replied simply. 800,000 years ago, your people and others like you decided that humanity was too dangerous to be allowed to exist in galactic society. You exiled us to the void, expecting us to die quietly and conveniently. The display changed again, showing historical records from the time of humanity's banishment. Images of human colonies being evacuated, human trade vessels being seized, human families being torn apart as an entire species was forced into exile. You were afraid of us then because we adapted too quickly, learned too fast, grew too strong. You couldn't understand how a species could be both cooperative and competitive, both peaceful and warlike. So you removed us from the equation. Admiral Torvak felt something he'd never experienced in his long military career, true fear. Not fear of death, which was something every soldier accepted, but fear of judgment. The human commander's words carried the weight of absolute moral authority, the certainty of a wronged party that had returned to collect a debt. We were following council orders, he said weakly. Of course you were, Sarah agreed. Individual guilt has never been our concern. We understand the nature of collective decision-making, the way civilizations can make choices that no individual would make alone. But understanding doesn't mean forgiveness. A new voice joined the conversation, an aged Kitharan accent that Torvak recognized immediately. Admiral, this is Planetary Governor Sectal. I've been monitoring this exchange. Commander Chen, I was there. I was a junior officer in the Council fleet when the banishment order was issued. Sarah's image split, showing the elderly governor appearing on screen alongside her. His aged features were lined with guilt that had clearly haunted him for centuries. I want you to know that not all of us agreed with the decision, Sectal continued. Many of us argued that humanity should be given time to integrate, to learn to coexist peacefully. But the fear was too strong, the political momentum too great. Governor, Sarah said gently, and for a moment her expression softened. Your individual conscience was noted. Humanity has excellent records. We know exactly who voted for banishment, who spoke against it, and who remained silent when they could have made a difference. The implications of those words sent chills through both Kitharan officers. Humanity hadn't just returned. They had returned with perfect memory of every slight, every betrayal, every act of cowardice that had led to their exile. This is why we're here, Sarah continued. Not for random destruction, not for conquest in the traditional sense. We're here to balance the scales, to ensure that justice, delayed by 800,000 years, is finally served. What form will this justice take? Governor Sectal asked quietly. Sarah's expression became unreadable again. That depends entirely on how galactic civilization responds to our return. We've learned patience during our exile, Governor. We've learned to think in terms of geological time scales. We can afford to be thorough. Admiral Torvak found his voice again. You're talking about the destruction of galactic civilization. I'm talking about the restructuring of galactic civilization, Sarah corrected. Humanity spent 800,000 years learning not just new technologies, but new ways of thinking about society, about justice, about the responsibilities of advanced species toward one another. We've come back to teach. The display changed once more, showing scenes from human colonies in the void. Vast cities built inside asteroids, artificial worlds constructed from pure energy, populations numbered in the trillions working together with a harmony that no galactic civilization had ever achieved. You see, Sarah explained, exile was the best thing that ever happened to humanity. It forced us to evolve beyond our limitations, to become something greater than we ever could have been if we'd remained comfortable in galactic society. We learned to think as one species while maintaining individual identity. We learned to plan not just for years or centuries, but for hundreds of thousands of years. Most importantly, we learned what it means to be truly alone, and why that should never happen to anyone else. So what happens now? Governor Sectal asked. Now, Sarah said, we begin the transition period. Galactic civilization has 72 hours to convene an emergency session of the Council. Every species, every government, every significant political entity will send representatives. We have proposals to make. And if they refuse? Sarah's smile returned, but there was nothing gentle about it this time. Governor, we control every strategic position in the galaxy. We can shut down faster-than-light travel, cut off communications between worlds, disable any technology we choose. The question isn't whether they'll come to negotiate, it's whether they'll come voluntarily or as prisoners. The transmission ended, leaving Admiral Torvak and Governor Sectal staring at a blank screen. Around them, their crews worked frantically to regain control of their systems, to understand how their most advanced technology had been rendered useless by an enemy they couldn't even properly detect. But the humans hadn't left. They remained in their impossible positions, watchful and patient, a constant reminder that the balance of power in the galaxy had shifted permanently. The age of human exile was over. The age of human judgment had begun. And across the galaxy, on thousands of worlds where similar confrontations had taken place, the same message was being delivered with the same calm certainty. Humanity had returned, and they had not forgotten. The emergency council session convened exactly 72 hours after humanity's ultimatum, but the Great Assembly Hall looked nothing like it had during previous gatherings. Human observers stood at regular intervals along the walls, not guards exactly, but their presence made it clear who now held real power in the galaxy. Chancellor Mordun's crystalline form pulsed with nervous energy as he called the session to order. Representatives from over 300 species had answered the summons, but many chairs remained empty. Several civilizations had simply vanished from galactic communication networks, their worlds reporting that human administrators had taken control of essential systems for the transition period. Honored delegates, Mordun began, his voice carrying across the vast chamber, we gather under circumstances unprecedented in galactic history. Humanity has returned, and they have demands. Ambassador Zector leaned forward in her seat, her forearms trembling slightly. Chancellor, before we begin, I must ask, what assurance do we have that this proceeding is being conducted freely? These observers, their presence suggests we're negotiating under duress. One of the human observers stepped forward, a tall man whose physical appearance suggested he might be in his 30s, but whose eyes held depths that spoke of centuries beyond counting. He wore a simple uniform bearing no rank insignia, yet every being in the chamber instinctively recognized him as someone of immense authority. I am Director James Harrison of the Terran Integration Authority, he said, his voice carrying easily through the chamber without amplification. I'm here to ensure this proceeding is conducted fairly and completely. You are free to speak, to argue, to refuse any proposal we make. You are not free to ignore us or pretend that the last 72 hours haven't fundamentally altered the balance of power in this galaxy. General Vexter stood, his scarred features set in grim lines. Director Harrison, I'll speak plainly. You've effectively conquered galactic civilization without firing a shot. Your forces control our communications, our transportation networks, our defensive systems. Why go through the pretense of negotiation? Harrison's expression remained neutral, but something that might have been approval flickered in his ancient eyes. Because, General, humanity learned something during our exile that apparently escaped galactic civilization. True power isn't the ability to destroy, it's the ability to build something better than what came before. He gestured, and the chamber's holographic display activated, showing images that made several delegates gasp in surprise. Human cities that seemed to defy physics, stretching across impossible dimensions. Planets that appeared to be constructed from pure energy, their surfaces shifting and flowing like liquid light. Populations of beings working together with a harmony that no galactic civilization had ever achieved. This is what we built in the void, Harrison continued. Not just technology, though our technology is certainly beyond what you currently understand. We built a society that functions without the constant friction and conflict that has characterized galactic civilization for the past 800,000 years. Senator Clack of the Reptilian Dominion hissed through his translator. Impossible. Conflict is natural, inevitable. Different species have different needs, different goals. Perfect harmony is a fantasy. Is it? Harrison asked mildly. Then explain this. The display changed, showing real-time feeds from across human space. Dozens of different species, some familiar, others completely unknown, worked side by side on projects of staggering complexity. Cities being constructed in the hearts of stars, artificial universes being crafted in laboratory conditions, entire stellar systems being reorganized for optimal efficiency and beauty. These are species we encountered during our exile, Harrison explained. Refugees from failed civilizations, survivors of cosmic disasters, beings who had been exiled just as we were. We learned to integrate them into our society without losing what made each species unique. It's possible, delegates. It just requires a level of maturity that galactic civilization has never achieved. Ancient Keeper Thulvar spoke from his position at the back of the chamber, his voice cracked with age and regret. Director Harrison, what exactly are you proposing? Harrison turned to face the ancient being with visible respect. Keeper Thulvar, you were one of the few who spoke against our banishment. Your voice was noted and remembered. What we're proposing is simple. The peaceful integration of galactic civilization into human space, with full autonomy for all species willing to accept certain basic principles of coexistence. The chamber erupted in angry voices. Integration, human space, what gives you the right? Harrison waited patiently for the noise to die down before continuing. What gives us the right is the fact that we're the only civilization in galactic history to achieve true stability and growth across multiple millennia. Every other attempt at galactic government has ended in collapse, war, or stagnation. We offer something different. And those who refuse, asked Ambassador Yultara of the Hegemony Collective. Will be left alone, Harrison said simply. We're not interested in conquest in the traditional sense. Any species or civilization that wishes to maintain independence may do so, as long as they don't interfere with the peaceful development of those who choose integration. That sounds too simple, General Vexter said suspiciously. There must be conditions, restrictions. There are, Harrison acknowledged. No slavery, no genocide, no expansion beyond your current territorial boundaries without negotiation. No development of weapons designed specifically to target civilian populations. Basic principles that most civilized beings already claim to follow. Chancellor Mordan's form pulsed faster. And how would these principles be enforced? The same way they're enforced in human space, Harrison replied. Through education, social pressure, and when absolutely necessary, intervention by beings who have the wisdom and power to make such interventions stick. The display changed again, showing examples of human intervention in various conflicts. Not the massive military operations that galactic civilizations were used to, but precise, surgical responses that ended conflicts with minimal casualties and maximum effectiveness. You see, Harrison explained, we learned during our exile that the threat of force is far more effective than the application of force. When every potential aggressor knows with absolute certainty that any act of aggression will be stopped immediately and completely, aggression becomes pointless. And you believe you have that level of power? Senator Clack challenged. In response, Harrison simply gestured toward one of the human observers along the wall. The figure, a young woman who appeared to be barely out of her teens, raised her hand. Every piece of technology in the chamber simply stopped working. Lights, life support, gravity generators, communication systems, everything shut down for exactly 3 seconds before coming back online. That was achieved by a single individual using basic human education-level technology, Harrison said calmly. We have billions of individuals with capabilities far beyond that level, and collective resources that span dimensions your science doesn't yet understand. The question isn't whether we have the power to enforce our principles. It's whether you're willing to work with us to build something better than what currently exists. Governor Sectel of the Kithara system stood slowly. Director Harrison, you spoke of integration. What would that actually mean for our daily lives, our governments, our cultures? Harrison's expression softened slightly. Governor, integration doesn't mean assimilation. Your species would maintain its culture, its governmental structures, its unique characteristics. What changes is that you'd have access to technologies and resources that would solve most of your current problems, and you'd be part of a larger community dedicated to growth and exploration rather than competition and conflict. But under human authority, Ambassador Zector pointed out. Under human guidance, Harrison corrected. There's a difference. We don't want to rule you, we want to teach you. To share what we've learned about building stable, prosperous, peaceful societies. To help you avoid the mistakes that have led to the collapse of every previous galactic civilization. And what about justice? The voice came from the back of the chamber, an elderly Vorthak who had remained silent until now. What about accountability for the decision to banish your species? Harrison's expression grew thoughtful. Justice has many forms. The individuals who made those decisions 800,000 years ago are long dead. The civilizations that implemented them have evolved. What purpose would punishment serve now? Then you're simply forgetting what was done to you. No, Harrison said firmly. We're choosing to focus on preventing it from happening to anyone else. The past cannot be changed, but the future can be shaped. That's what we're offering, a chance to shape a better future. Ancient Keeper Thulvar spoke again, his voice heavy with consideration. This integration you propose, would it be voluntary for individuals as well as governments? Completely voluntary, Harrison confirmed. Any being who wishes to remain in traditional galactic civilization may do so. Any being who wishes to join human space may apply for citizenship. And any being who simply wants to be left alone will be left alone, as long as they don't harm others. It sounds almost too good to be true, Chancellor Morden observed. It should, Harrison replied with a slight smile, because it represents the culmination of 800,000 years of learning, growing, and evolving. We've made the mistakes you're afraid we'll make. We've faced the problems you think are unsolvable. We've found solutions that work. And if we refuse your offer? General Vexter asked bluntly. Harrison's expression grew sad. Then you'll continue on the path you're currently following, which, based on historical analysis, gives galactic civilization perhaps another 50,000 years before the next major collapse. We'll establish our territory in uninhabited sectors and continue our expansion into other dimensions and galaxies. You'll be welcome to join us when you're ready. The chamber fell silent as delegates processed the implications. Humanity wasn't just offering a choice between integration and independence. They were offering a choice between evolution and eventual extinction. We need time to consider this proposal, Chancellor Morden said finally. Of course, Harrison agreed. You have as much time as you need. Our forces will maintain their current positions to ensure stability during the decision-making process. When you're ready to talk further, simply broadcast your decision on any council frequency. We'll be listening. He turned to leave, then paused. One final thought, honored delegates. 800,000 years ago, you banished humanity because you were afraid of what we might become. Today, you have the opportunity to become part of what we became. I hope you'll consider the difference. With that, the human observers filed out of the chamber, leaving the delegates alone with their thoughts and fears, and the gradual realization that everything they thought they knew about power, civilization, and humanity's place in the universe had just been proven utterly wrong. The real negotiations would begin soon. But first, each species would have to decide what kind of future they wanted to be part of. 3 weeks had passed since humanity's ultimatum, and the galaxy had split into factions that few could have predicted. In a private conference room aboard the human dreadnought Redemption, Director Harrison sat across from an unlikely group of delegates who had requested a private meeting away from the formal council proceedings. Across the table sat ancient keeper Thulvar, whose species had witnessed countless galactic civilizations rise and fall. Beside him was Dr. Yenentai, a brilliant Crystarch scientist who had spent her entire career studying dimensional physics. Governor Sectel represented a growing faction of moderate voices calling for measured cooperation with humanity. And perhaps most surprisingly, General Vexter sat stiffly in his chair, his military bearing intact despite the obvious internal conflict written across his scarred features. Thank you for agreeing to this private discussion, Dr. Yenentai began, her crystalline form shimmering with nervous energy. The formal sessions have become unproductive, too much posturing, too much fear driving the decision-making process. Harrison nodded thoughtfully. Fear is understandable. Your civilizations have existed in a certain paradigm for hundreds of thousands of years. We're asking you to consider abandoning that paradigm for something completely unknown. Unknown to us, General Vexter said gruffly. You've had 800,000 years to perfect your society. We're being asked to trust in results we can't verify independently. A reasonable concern, Harrison acknowledged. Would you be willing to see for yourselves? The question hung in the air for a moment before Keeper Thulvar leaned forward. You're offering to show us human space directly. More than that, Harrison replied. I'm offering to take a small group of observers to see our civilization firsthand, to witness our cities, our people, our way of life, to speak with beings from species that joined us voluntarily and hear their experiences directly. Dr. Yenentai's form pulsed with excitement. The technological implications alone. Director Harrison, your people have clearly made breakthroughs in dimensional physics that we can barely theorize about. From a scientific perspective, the opportunity to study your achievements would be invaluable. Science is meant to be shared, Harrison agreed. That's one of the fundamental principles we operate under. Knowledge belongs to all beings who can use it responsibly. Governor Sectel shifted uncomfortably. Director, I must ask directly, is this genuine cooperation you're offering, or are we being given a tour designed to convince us to surrender our independence? Harrison's expression grew serious. Governor, I could have this entire conversation while showing you a completely fabricated reality. Our technology makes such deception trivially easy. The fact that I'm not doing so should tell you something about our intentions. How would we know if you were? General Vexter asked suspiciously. You wouldn't, Harrison admitted. Which is why I'm going to do something that will either prove our good faith or demonstrate our complete contempt for your intelligence. He stood and walked to the room's main display panel. I'm going to show you exactly how our technology works and give you the basic principles you'd need to detect any deception we might attempt. The display activated, showing technical diagrams that made Dr. Yenentai gasp in shock. The mathematics alone represented centuries of theoretical advancement, but what Harrison was showing them was far beyond pure theory. This is our dimensional manipulation technology, Harrison explained. The basic principle is that what you call reality is actually just one layer of a multidimensional structure. By learning to access and manipulate the other layers, we can achieve effects that appear to violate the laws of physics as you understand them. Impossible, Dr. Yenentai whispered. The energy requirements alone would exceed the output of entire star systems. Only if you're working within a single-dimensional layer, Harrison replied. But energy from one layer can be borrowed and redirected through others. It's not free energy, it's more like energy accounting across multiple books simultaneously. He gestured, and the room around them suddenly expanded, becoming a vast chamber filled with impossible geometries. Stars hung in the air within reach, their nuclear fires somehow contained and gentle to the touch. Plants grew in patterns that defied gravity, their roots extending into dimensions that existed parallel to normal space. This ship is bigger inside than outside, Harrison continued conversationally, as if casual violations of physics were perfectly normal. The conference room we're sitting in technically exists in 7 different dimensional layers simultaneously. From your perspective, you're in a room perhaps 20 meters square. From our perspective, we're in a space roughly the size of a small moon. General Vexter had gone pale, his military mind struggling to process the tactical implications. Your ships, how large are they really? The dreadnought you're aboard has a total internal volume approximately equivalent to Earth's moon, Harrison said casually. It carries a population of about 50 million humans, plus manufacturing facilities, agricultural systems, research laboratories, and everything needed for indefinite self-sufficiency. 50 million, Keeper Thulvar repeated slowly. And you said this was just one ship in your advance force. One of the smaller ones, actually. Our city ships typically carry between 1 and 50 billion inhabitants each. The numbers were staggering. Dr. Yenentai's crystalline form was pulsing so rapidly it was almost painful to watch. Director, if what you're showing us is real, then humanity's total population is currently estimated at approximately 1 quintillion individuals, Harrison finished. Spread across roughly 10 million major installations and an uncountable number of smaller outposts throughout the void between galaxies. We've had 800,000 years to grow and expand without the territorial limitations that plague galactic civilizations. Governor Sectel found his voice first. That's more individuals than have ever lived in the entire history of galactic civilization. Yes, Harrison agreed. And every one of them remembers the injustice of our exile. Every one of them was raised understanding that they exist because their species was cast out by beings who feared their potential. And yet, every one of them has also been educated to understand that justice and revenge are not the same thing. The room returned to its normal appearance, but the implications of what they'd witnessed hung heavy in the air. This is why integration is voluntary rather than mandatory, Harrison continued. We don't need territory, resources, or subjects. We have more than we could use in 1,000,000 years. What we want is the opportunity to share what we've learned, to prevent the mistakes that led to our exile from happening to anyone else. But surely, General Vexter said, his military instincts still engaged, surely there must be some limit to your patience, some point at which peaceful coexistence becomes impossible. Harrison's expression grew thoughtful. An excellent question, General. Yes, there are limits. We will not tolerate genocide, slavery, or the deliberate destruction of sentient life. We will not permit the development of weapons designed to destroy entire civilizations, and we will not allow any force to threaten the beings under our protection. And how would such violations be addressed? Dr. Yenentai asked. Swiftly and completely, Harrison replied, but also proportionally. Our goal is always to stop harmful behavior with the minimum necessary force. We've learned that excessive response often creates more problems than it solves. Keeper Thulvar leaned back in his chair, his ancient eyes distant with thought. Director Harrison, may I ask a personal question? You speak of justice and learning as if these are recent insights. But you're clearly far older than you appear. You've lived through our exile personally. Don't you feel anger, hatred for what was done to your people? Harrison was quiet for a long moment before answering. I feel sadness, he said finally. Sadness for the opportunities lost, for the suffering that could have been prevented, for the waste of potential that characterized the last 800,000 years. But anger, hatred, those emotions served their purpose during the early years of our exile. They motivated us to survive, to grow stronger. But eventually we learned that carrying them was like drinking poison and expecting our enemies to die. So you've simply forgiven us? Governor Sectel asked. We've moved beyond the need for forgiveness, Harrison replied. Forgiveness implies that we still see ourselves as victims and you as perpetrators. We don't. We see ourselves as a successful species offering to share our success with others who are still struggling with problems we solved long ago. That seems almost impossibly mature, Dr. Yenentai observed. It's the result of 800,000 years of conscious evolution, Harrison said. Not just technological evolution, but psychological, social, spiritual evolution. We had to become better than what we were, or we would have destroyed ourselves in the void. General Vexter stood suddenly, his decision apparently made. I want to see it. I want to see your civilization with my own eyes, speak to beings who chose to join you, understand what you're really offering. As do I, Dr. Yenent added quickly. The scientific implications alone. Governor Sectel nodded agreement, and all eyes turned to Keeper Thulvar. The ancient being was silent for a long time before speaking. I was there when the vote was cast to exile your people. I argued against it, but not strongly enough. I've carried the guilt of that failure for 800,000 years. He looked directly at Harrison. If you're truly offering redemption rather than retribution, then yes, I want to see what we could have been. Harrison smiled, and for a moment the ancient weariness in his eyes was replaced by something that might have been hope. Then we'll begin immediately. But I warn you, once you've seen what's possible, you'll never be able to go back to thinking small. As they prepared for a journey that would take them beyond the boundaries of normal space and time, none of them could know that their decision would ultimately determine the fate of not just their own species, but the entire future of galactic civilization. The real test was about to begin. The journey to human space took 3 days, though the delegates quickly learned that concepts like time and distance had different meanings when traveling through dimensional layers that existed parallel to normal space. When they emerged from the void between galaxies, what they found defied every expectation. Dr. Yenent was the first to break the stunned silence that filled the observation deck. This is impossible. We're looking at a galaxy. Director Harrison smiled as he watched their reactions. Not a galaxy, Doctor. A construction. What you're seeing is the result of 800,000 years of engineering on a cosmic scale. Before them spread a spiral structure that matched any natural galaxy in size and complexity, but every star system showed signs of deliberate planning and construction. Artificial stars burned in perfect formation, their energy output precisely controlled. Worlds orbited in configurations that maximized both efficiency and beauty. And connecting it all was a network of what could only be described as living light, energy pathways that pulsed with consciousness and purpose. Every star system you see was built rather than found, Harrison continued. We learned early in our exile that searching for habitable worlds was inefficient. It was easier to build exactly what we needed. General Vexter's military mind was struggling to process the scale of what he was seeing. The resources required, the coordination. How is any of this possible? When you have 800,000 years and unlimited energy from dimensional manipulation, anything becomes possible, Harrison replied. But more importantly, when you have a billion brilliant minds working together toward common goals rather than competing for limited resources, progress accelerates exponentially. Their ship, which Harrison casually mentioned, was being guided by a collective consciousness that included millions of human minds working in harmony, approached what appeared to be the galaxy's capital system. Multiple worlds orbited a central star, but as they drew closer, the delegates realized that worlds was an inadequate term for what they were seeing. Each of those planets is actually a complex of billions of individual habitats, Harrison explained. Some house entire civilizations in spaces no larger than a city block, Others contain universes in miniature where beings can explore possibilities that don't exist in normal reality. And some are simple gardens where people go to remember what it was like when a single planet was enough. Keeper Thulvar, who had remained silent during most of the journey, finally spoke. Harrison, what I'm seeing challenges every assumption about the nature of existence itself. You haven't just advanced technologically, you've redefined what life can be. That was necessary, Harrison replied seriously. The old paradigms, scarcity, competition, territorial expansion, those led to the conflicts that resulted in our exile. We had to evolve beyond them or repeat the same mistakes on an even larger scale. Their ship settled into a docking facility that existed in what Harrison described as folded space, a construction technique that allowed massive structures to occupy relatively small areas of normal reality. As they disembarked, the delegates found themselves in a vast plaza filled with beings from countless species, many of which none of them recognized. Director Harrison? The voice belonged to a being whose species Dr. Yenant recognized as extinct. Their homeworld had been destroyed in a supernova over 200,000 years ago. Harrison's face lit up with genuine warmth as he embraced the newcomer. Velter, perfect timing. Our guests were hopping to speak with beings who chose to join human civilization voluntarily. Velter's 6 arms gestured in what was clearly excitement. Oh, excellent. I love telling that story. Come, all of you. Let me show you what my people have accomplished since we found sanctuary here. As they walked through the plaza, Velter explained how his species, the last few million survivors of their world's destruction, had encountered a human exploration vessel while drifting in escape pods. We expected slavery or worse, Velter said cheerfully. Most spacefaring civilizations we'd encountered saw refugees as convenient labor sources. But the humans, they offered us citizenship, not just survival but full participation in their society. And what did that mean in practice? Governor Sectel asked. It meant they gave us an entire system to rebuild our civilization, plus access to technologies that allowed us to resurrect our dead culture in ways we'd never imagined possible. Velter gestured to a nearby building that seemed to shimmer with inner light. That's our cultural center. Inside, we've reconstructed our entire homeworld in dimensional space. Every city, every landscape, every work of art or literature that existed before the supernova. Our children can walk through the history of our people as if it were a living place. Dr. Yenantai's form pulsed with amazement. You're talking about the complete restoration of a dead civilization. Not restoration, Velter corrected. Evolution. We kept everything worth keeping from our past, but we also embraced new possibilities that human technology made available. Our artists now work in dimensions of color that don't exist in normal space. Our musicians compose symphonies using the vibrational frequencies of quantum fields. Our philosophers debate questions that can only be asked when you understand the true structure of reality. General Vexter looked around at the diverse crowd moving through the plaza. But how do you maintain order, unity, with so many different species, different needs and desires? Come and see, Harrison said, leading them toward what appeared to be a governmental building. Inside, they found something that challenged every assumption about how advanced civilizations should function. Instead of a traditional council or parliament, they observed what could only be described as a living democracy. Millions of beings participated simultaneously in decision-making processes that occurred across multiple dimensional layers. Every citizen has a voice, Harrison explained as they watched the process in action. Not just in voting, but in the formation of ideas, the development of policies, the implementation of decisions. Our consciousness-linking technology allows us to share thoughts and perspectives directly, which means misunderstandings are rare and compromises are actually possible. But surely there must be disagreements, Governor Sectel protested. Conflicts of interest. Of course there are, agreed a new voice. They turned to see a being whose species Dr. Yenantai recognized as one of the most aggressive in galactic history, a race that had been banned from Council space for repeated acts of unprovoked warfare. I am warrior-philosopher Graktal, the being said, using a title that would have been impossible in galactic civilization. My people joined human space after our homeworld was quarantined for excessive militarism. We were, to be honest, a species addicted to conflict. And now, General Vexter asked, professional interest overcoming his surprise. Now we channel that aggression into productive competition, Gractal replied with what might have been a smile. We compete to see who can solve problems most effectively, who can create the most beautiful art, who can push the boundaries of knowledge furthest. All the intensity, none of the destruction. But what about your warrior traditions? General Vexter pressed. Still honored, Gractal said proudly. But now we fight entropy instead of each other. We wage war against ignorance, against suffering, against the heat death of the universe itself. These are enemies worthy of our abilities. As they continued their tour, the delegates were introduced to dozens of species, each with their own story of finding place and purpose within human civilization. Former pirates who had become explorers of parallel dimensions. Refugee populations that had been given entire star systems to rebuild their cultures. Even artificial intelligences that had achieved consciousness and been welcomed as full citizens. The key insight, Harrison explained as they walked through a garden where plants from 1,000 worlds grew in impossible harmony, was that diversity is strength, not weakness. Every species brings unique perspectives, unique capabilities, unique ways of understanding reality. The challenge isn't eliminating differences, it's finding ways for those differences to work together. Dr. Yenentai stopped suddenly, her crystalline form shimmering with realization. You've solved the fundamental equation. Which equation is that, Doctor? Harrison asked gently. The balance between individual freedom and collective good. Every civilization in galactic history has struggled with that balance. Too much individualism leads to chaos and conflict. Too much collectivism leads to stagnation and oppression. But you found a way to maximize both simultaneously. It wasn't easy, Harrison admitted. And it required technologies that allowed us to link consciousness while maintaining individual identity. But yes, we've learned how to be both completely individual and completely united when necessary. Ancient Keeper Thulvar had been quiet for hours, but now he spoke with deep emotion. Director Harrison, I need to know. If we had made different decisions 800,000 years ago, if we had chosen integration instead of exile, could all of this have been achieved within galactic civilization? Harrison considered the question seriously before answering. Honestly, Keeper, probably not. Galactic civilization was too comfortable, too set in its ways. Major evolutionary leaps usually require pressure that comfortable civilizations don't experience. Our exile forced us to grow in ways we might never have grown otherwise. So our mistake led to something better than what we could have achieved if we'd avoided the mistake. All mistakes can lead to wisdom if we learn from them instead of repeating them, Harrison replied. The question now is, what will you do with the wisdom we